This took place sometime in 2015 during the winter, and I think this was sometime in December. I was at Walmart and I was getting some gifts for some of my friends. Now, I was there with my brother and a good friend of my mom's, which we'll call her Mary Beth. I'm not going to state well, her last name for privacy reasons, but we'll call her Mary Beth. Now, she took me and my brother to go do Christmas shopping, as it was one of our traditions that me and my brother had liked to do, is go Christmas shopping. However, though, the Walmart I went to was the closest one that was in my hometown, and it was located not far from a very busy street. Now, while Mary Beth and my brother gone off to go shop for my mom and dad, as well as me, since I couldn't be around, I decided to wander around Walmart. As long as I didn't leave Walmart, it should be safe for me to wander around Walmart. I was getting some gifts for my brother when all of a sudden, when I was at the chip aisle getting myself maybe something for my brother, there was this man at the end of the hallway. He looked like he was in his early 30s and he seemed pretty neat. He kind of reminded me of Cal Hockley from James Cameron's Titanic movie. It's just the way he was, like, especially with his hair, the way it is act. You know, the scene where Cal aborts the Titanic. Yeah. He walks up to me and he asks me if he could help me with something. I know that he didn't look like a Walmart worker, and red flags were going off in my head. Oh no, I'm fine, I said. He then asked me that if I wanted some presents for my brother and asked some really weird questions. I told him that I was fine and that I would be on my way. But when I left the chip aisle to go to another aisle, this man would be in almost every aisle. Now, this was starting to get creepy, seeing that he seemed to like me for whatever reason. I'm 17, well, or was 17 at the time, so he seemed to be some sort of stalker for whatever reason. I grabbed my stuff from my brother and I ended up paying for it, but the guy was waiting for me at the outside of the Walmart near the entrance. He looked at me and kept my eye on me, and I stayed near the McDonald's where the other workers were. I was honestly had no idea what the hell this man was doing. When Mary Beth and my brother showed back up after they paid at the checkout, I began crying, realizing that I was being stalked, and Mary Beth asked me what was happening or what happened. I said that there was a man, and I described it as best as I could. Mary Beth eventually called the cops, and we were in the car for a while I was just sobbing in tears. My brother started to cry a bit too, because he didn't understand what was happening or what was wrong. After about 15 to 20 minutes of Mary Beth talking to the police, we headed back to her house to wrap the gifts, and she told me very disturbing news. That man that I described to her, that looked like Cal Hockley, he actually was a kidnapper, and he was reported as a person who could do sexual assaults to women. And I honestly was very, very scared about that man. I said that I knew something was wrong about that man, but I didn't even wanted to tell the worker about it because I was afraid he was going to do something to me. I don't know if he was going to kidnap me or rob me or do God knows what, but I had never seen that man again, and I don't know if the police ever found him, but I would like to think that he is in prison right now, where all hell spawns should be. About sometime maybe in 2016, this took place in December, and it was during the winter of 2016. Since I was 18 years old, my mom was driving me to my riding stable to ride. When we got to the countryside, this is when things got different. Mama and I were driving slow as the road was covered in snow and it was snowing hard, so we had to take our time. We left early enough so we could take our time there, and as we were driving slowly, I looked up to see that there was a white horse standing in the middle of the field. My mom saw it too, and it was a white horse. It looked like a gypsy vanner, and it didn't have anything on it, like no rider or anything. And there was no fencing around there, so was confused as to why the horse was there. My mom pulled over, and me and her walked up to see if the horse was okay, but the horse took off. We continued, down to the barn, and I had no idea where it went off to. The next day was New Year's Eve of 2016, and it was snowing hard that day too, so my mom was taking her time to drive up there. We pulled over again and saw the same horse there. He seemed to be a little closer now. We saw that he had no rider on, no blanket, and no halter on, so obviously he might have been a wild horse, or he must have somehow got out of the stall or stable, maybe even the field, and he's somehow roaming around. My mom contacted the cops about a lost horse and even Aunt about it to see if there was any owners who owned this horse that we described. They contacted everybody in the area, but they said no, they didn't see that same horse or anything like that. Now, fast forward to sometime early of 2017, and this is when it wasn't storming, but it was cold. Not too cold that you can't ride, but cold enough that feels like winter's still around. I looked up again on our way back from the barn, and my mom saw the horse and pulled over. This horse looked as normal. He was white and he came closer to the road. And I looked to see that he seemed to be okay, but I didn't understand why he was here. I had my own halter and lead rope, so I put it on and I decided to walk him to one of the nearest barn. I knocked on the door of a farmer who seemed to be in his late 40s and asked if this horse was his. He said that he had no ownership of the horse and he has never seen him before. This was getting strange. I decided to take the horse to a place, and I had no idea if anyone, for that matter, had seen the horse. My mom decided to call the nearest vet, but of course, since it was Sunday, not a lot of vets would be open. But she called the emergency vet, the nearest one, who was still open, and explained about the horse. Now, I looked at the leg of the flank of the horse on the right and realized that he had some marks that looked like someone had been cropping him as much. He was kind of sensitive and started to freak out, but I eventually got him to hush her down, and I looked to see that someone had been abusing the horse. Now, I was quite confused as well, so I ended up telling my parents about it, and, well, of course, the cops investigated the area, and the horse was taken to what seemed to be a rescue horse center, or at least a facility where they take in rescued animals. I don't know why that horse had this kind of issue or anything like that, but it wasn't like that, and apparently we found out some disturbing news. Apparently, the owners that previously owned the horse had been mistreating it so much to the point where they ended up leaving the horse wandering around the farmlands of the area where I used to ride at. And the owners have been charged with neglect of horses, even so far as mistreating them and etc. I still to this day hope that this horse that I saved is in a happy home and is living a happy life. This took place sometime in the winter of 2017, And this is actually one of the nights that I really dreaded. Now, to cut to the chase, it was sometime in 2017, probably near the end of the year. It was December, and my mom and I were driving to Pony Club when all of a sudden we looked to see how foggy it was getting. Now, since it was around starting to get darker now in the early hours of the evening, it was sometime when it started to get really dark. Now, my mom was driving as best as she could, but as we were driving, I looked up to see that there was something run across the yard from one farm area to the other. I couldn't really get to see what it clearly was as it was about too far away, so my mom ended up pulling over and getting her flashlight out. We obviously couldn't see anyone, and we didn't see anybody around. We drive up a bit closer to see that there was some footprints in the snow. I had no idea who it was. At first I thought it could have been a bear, but these footprints didn't look like a resemble of a bear. It looked like a resemble of a man, but it didn't look like snow prints or anything. That still confuses me and my mom to this day. And we looked over to our left to see that there was this tall black figure standing maybe 14 or 15 feet away. It was on the other side of the fence, which had been knocked down for a little while. But whatever it was didn't look at us, so I couldn't get any good features as to what it looked like. But it disappeared back into the darkness, and I never saw that figure again. My mom is still questioned about this to this day on what we saw, but I have no idea what it actually was, and I still don't know to this day what it actually was. That still confuses me to this day. For some context, this took place sometime in 2018 in the winter, probably sometime in December. To cut to the chase and give a bit of background information, this took place when I was working at Orion Stable at the time. Now, this was on December 23rd, and this honestly was the creepiest one I've ever imagined. Now, I was doing my work after my lessons, and after I did my lesson and I was doing my last bit of work, I was taking some hay to the horses in the pasture, and I had to go to the one in the far pasture not far from the house. Now, as I was taking some hay to there, as the horse was there, however, I spotted some handle or whatever it was sticking out of the snow. Now I thought that maybe it might have been maybe one of the buckets that we had in the summer that got buried, or it could possibly be one of the tack boxes or something. I decided that I would check it out as soon as I dumped the hay in the pasture near the house. So I did that. The horse was really polite, and she wasn't really greedy like the other ones. Now, her name was Val, and she looked over it, and she had a look of concerned expression. I ended up looking over to see that handle looked like it came from a suitcase. So as I got closer, I realized that it was a suitcase. It's one of those briefcase suitcases that people take to work sometimes. I took a look at it, but I decided to open it a little bit. I decided to open to see what the contents of it was, and what I found honestly chilled me to the bone. There were some knives, there were some guns, drugs, and even illegal stuff. Stuff that can get arrested, and I honestly had no idea who the hell was smart enough to hide this through the snow. I ended up taking it over back to the barn and reported to the authorities. But as they took the briefcase, they had no idea on who left it there on the barn property, and I still question to this day on who actually left that briefcase with all the stuff there. I have no idea if it was a group of men, women, mixed, or even just some person leaving it there for someone to hide. They probably hid it there so no one could see it. I unfortunately never got updates on it, so I don't know what actually became of it.